Hello! For this video, the whole purpose is to make sure everyone understands the Mapping the Conversations essay as an assignment so that y'all can be as successful as possible when you turn this assignment in. So I have on this screen here just logged into Blackboard, and I'm going to go over to the side and hit Assignment Prompts and Submissions. And then I'm just going to scroll until we have Project 4, Mapping the Conversations essay. As you can see, we're on Project 4 out of 6. We're about halfway through the semester, so we have just a little bit while to go. So I'm just going to click on this, and then you can see this is going to be where you will submit your final draft of the Mapping the Conversation essay, and it's going to be due Wednesday, July 15th, and right before midnight at 11:59. So here I'm just going to click on this PDF and it'll take us to the prompt. Awesome. So I'm just going to zoom in here and we're going to go through and make sure everyone knows the expectations for this assignment for this major essay. So it is Project 4, Mapping the Conversation, and basically the purpose is to do just that. At this point, y'all have all decided on an issue. You've talked about why you are passionate about it. You have identified stakeholders who you think that this issue is important to. You have even gone in and found a list of sources that relate to one of these stakeholders, and you've found these relevant, really good sources. You hopefully have been doing that for more than one as we get more and more drafts, more and more discussion forums. So you are already well on your way to completing this essay. In short, here's what it's all about. So in this scholarly essay, you are going to introduce the background and context of the current public issue that you've already chosen and demonstrate its importance. And then you're going to analyze 5 relevant stakeholders, which is defined here again: individuals or groups that are invested in or affected by the issue, employing stasis theory to understand the arguments being offered on your issue in the public sphere. So already you have kind of a lineup of what you need to accomplish in this essay. First of all, you are going to need to introduce the background and context of your issue. So that's going to be involving you talking about how this issue started, when, where, why is it relevant. Give us kind of up to speed information on the issue at hand. Maybe you need to define some words in your issue that people outside of a specific group wouldn't understand. If you're doing something especially in the sciences, maybe it's a phenomenon that you really need to go into depth about defining certain terms so that any audience can understand it. Then you are going to need to analyze at least 5 relevant stakeholders. So like we've talked about, you have already probably narrowed down to 5. You're already finding sources that are relevant. You need to analyze each group within itself and in relation to the other stakeholders, thus the Mapping the Conversations essay. Lastly, what you're going to need to do, this final component, is going to be employing stasis theory. So you are going to want to talk about where your stakeholders are agreeing and where they're disagreeing based on stasis theory. If you need a refresher on what that is, you can check out the video I posted a week or 2 ago that's called Stasis Theory. So, going further down into the prompt, you are going to need to locate, analyze a variety of academic and popular sources in order to understand the scope of this conversation and the different perspectives surrounding it. So you are going to want to challenge this tendency to oversimplify what is the current social or political issues as two-sided. In modern thought, we like to separate things into either, well, you either believe A or you believe B. You're either left or you're right. black or white, yes, no. It is this division that we like to set up of binaries, only two parts, when really any issue is way more complicated than that. For example, one thing you can think of that none of y'all are tackling this issue, but I think it provides a really good illustration of how all issues are more complex than just two sides, is that you can think about an issue like veganism. Now, you could split it up and say, oh, well, people are either, for veganism because they're just animal loving hippies, or they're against veganism because they are meat loving Southerners, all American type of people. But really, it's not like that. You can just think about someone who is vegan for a multitude of different reasons. Maybe they are for animal rights. Maybe it's an allergy that they are intolerant to the things that vegans avoid. Um, Maybe it is a political reason. Maybe it is something that they are trying to be on a diet just temporarily to lose weight. There are so many different reasons. On the flip side of that, maybe people are against vegans because they themselves have business in the meat industry, for example. Or maybe it is political. We could go on and on about this issue. The point is it is not just a left and a right side. It's not just a right or a wrong side. People are not even in conflict with each other so directly as we like to make it. And that is what you want to really portray through your Mapping the Conversations essay, is that you want to show all of these multiple perspectives so that you are laying the foundation that someone else, if they know nothing about your issue, they can understand what has been said about it so far. Now, coming down into more of the logistics, you are going to be creating a pretty long essay. It's going to have a minimum word count of 1,500 words, no maximum, and you're welcome to go longer than that 1,500, but make sure you are hitting that mark. You might consider using headings to help the reader navigate the essay. This is a class all about rhetoric, so always consider your audience. What would you appreciate if you were reading this? Maybe you could divide your paper using headings that label each stakeholder. That's something I've seen that's been really successful. Or you can have a different way you want to go about it. Totally up to you. You were the one creating this piece of rhetoric, so these are all choices for you to make. You should also come down here into this paragraph, and it gives you some really helpful things to consider when you're talking about stakeholders. So, like we've addressed earlier, there are two kinds of stakeholders. There are active and there are silent. And so here it shows, while many stakeholders are active advocates, others may be silent stakeholders, which means they're unaware of how important the issue impacts them, or they can't argue on their own behalf. A quintessential example of some group that might be a silent stakeholder would be children. A lot of issues are affecting them, but they don't have the platform that adults do to get their message across. Now, you can certainly choose one of these silent stakeholders, but make sure that of your 5, 4 of them minimum have to be active. And when you are talking about each stakeholder, make sure you're hitting these 3 points. Identify them. Who is this group of stakeholders? What are they in size, in demographic? Where are they located? When and where did they start? All of these things you can help give background on a stakeholder group. Their relationship to the issue. And then make sure you're arguing the values that connect their position. Super duper important is the first sentence of this. Actually, this whole paragraph is super important. This essay is not a persuasive essay. I should read this and walk away and have no idea what you as an author think about this issue. You are not infusing your own personal opinion at all. What you are doing is simply mapping the conversation. You are simply showing me and your audience what has been said so far with a very analytical view. So you're not saying who's correct. You're not pointing out flaws in thinking. You're not saying what you like best. Instead, you are exploring some of these questions that I'm going to highlight now. Why? How do these different stakeholders disagree or agree? That's where you can pull in stasis theory. Who is speaking? Who is not speaking? Who has a voice? Here. What are the primary concerns or goals or ideas or positions? What values are informing their perspective? And make sure you are applying stasis theory to better understand the nature of disagreement among the groups who are weighed in on your issue. So you can do this in a couple ways. You can have your little section about one stakeholder, and the last few sentences you can dedicate to talking about where there are slight variations in your stakeholder, and here's where they agree and disagree. You can do that for every stakeholder, and then at the end tie in something about stasis theory by looking at all of the groups as a whole. Where do these groups holistically fall on stasis theory in agreement or disagreement with each other? Or what I don't recommend, but you can certainly do it well if you put a lot of effort in, is don't talk about stasis theory until the very end and give a significant couple paragraphs about stasis theory from the whole paper. Whatever way you want to do it, make sure you're talking about stasis theory. I've seen a lot of students just ignore it, and it takes out a big chunk of their score because it is a vital part of the essay. So in order to make this C, follow these guidelines. They're all pretty self-explanatory. The one that I will hit on is that make sure you have at least 10 sources. That's super important. Make sure you cite all of them according to MLA or APA, your choice. Although MLA is the standard for English, but if you're more comfortable with APA, you can do that too. And be at least 1,500 words in length. If you want to get into that A or B range, go ahead and check out this section. It's basically do everything in the above section but more, but better, but more sophisticated, rich descriptions, more complex discussion of stasis theory, of your sources. Do everything and just a little bit more for that A. I also want to show you that there is a very helpful sample that I certainly recommend check out. So if you go into the course and coursework and units, scroll up until this week, which is week 6. You can scroll down and check out the sample Mapping the Conversations essay. When you're trying to see what form really works, this is an A paper, no doubt. You can see how they set up with that first part, talking about the issue, how did it start, why is it an issue, and then they go in and talk about each stakeholder by describing that stakeholder, the demographic, giving multiple viewpoints from each stakeholder, as not to give it just a one-dimensional view. And then they go in and they talk about stasis theory right here. And this author basically redoes this process over and over again until they've reached every stakeholder. Something that I want to leave y'all with is that every academic writer, which is what y'all are becoming through this class and through your college experience, every academic writer who wants to be successful looks at strong models. This is a strong model that you can take pieces that you like and say, how can I do this, but in a way that matches my content, but in a way that matches my style, my voice as a writer. So definitely go in, look at this, see what is successful, and see how you could emulate this in your own writing. And with that, if you have any questions, let me know, and I look forward to reading what y'all come up with as you submit the Mapping the Conversations essay.